Dash Deleg, this is Tibet This Week, a weekly news edition on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Central Tibetan Administration. Let us look at today's headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama undertakes first public engagement post-Losar. Sikyong concludes final leg of official visit in North America. Sikyong congratulates Shiv Pratap Shukla, new governor of Himachal Pradesh. Kalon meets Czech Foreign Minister Lipavsky. Spanish Senate launches first Inter-Parliamentary group for Tibet. European Parliament calls for immediate release of Tibetan political prisoners. Tibetans protest against deteriorating human rights situation in Tibet on commencement of 52nd UNHRC session. UN committee questions China on monoracial policies and widespread rights violations in Tibet and other regions. Representative Dr. Arya makes appeal to IPAC Tokyo Forum to issue statements on Tibet issue. Representative Singey meets members of Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defense and Trade, Human Rights Subcommittee. Students from Tibetan weekend schools across Australia partake in cultural meet. Tibet House Brazil hosts International Conference on Science and Religion for Peace. Friends and supporters join Losar celebration. On Tuesday this week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama greeted a group of Indians who belong to the M3M Foundation, Meherchand Mahajan Trust and Confederation of Indian Industry in the courtyard of the main temple in Dharamshala. Among the group were about 120 young Indians who graduated from I Empower Academy for Skills, an initiative of M3M Foundation, to whom His Holiness the Dalai Lama spoke about the importance of paying attention to study of the mind based on ancient Indian wisdom. His Holiness said the young Indians, along with their interest in modern technology, should focus on embracing this knowledge of Indian ancestors and contribute towards promotion of peace in the world.
So I'm hoping within my lifetime, I think the world can develop genuine, peaceful world. No longer weapon, no longer strong feeling of discrimination. A lot of Western educationists really showing interest about peace of mind.
The M3M Foundation, founded by M3M India Group, is working on equitable development to create brighter India. The foundation fosters life skills in the students under its care, encouraging them to value equality, empathy, inclusion, collaboration and trust. On the final leg of visitation before concluding his official engagements in North America, Sikyong met with executive members of the Alberta Tibetan Association and community members in Calgary on 16 February. Sikyong briefed the Tibetans on undertakings of the 16 Kashak and his political and administrative schemes for the coming years, which includes plans for the sustenance of the Tibetan settlements and empowerment of the Central Tibetan Administration staff, among others. Sikyong also interacted with Tibetan youngsters in the region to apprise them of issues concerning Tibet and the Tibetan people. Sikyong congratulated Shri Shiv Pratap, the newly appointed governor of Himachal Pradesh. In the letter, Sikyong conveyed deep gratitude owed to the government and people of Himachal Pradesh for their unwavering support and generosity in hosting His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan people. Sikyong wrote he hoped his friendship and affinity between our people will grow stronger. Kalon, Department of Information and International Relations of the Central Tibetan Administration, met with a high-level Czech Republic delegation led by Foreign Minister Jan Lipavsky in New Delhi on Friday last week. During the meeting, the Czech Foreign Minister highlighted the friendship shared between President Václav Havel and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the consistent support that Tibetans continue to receive from the public, Parliament, Senate and government of the Czech Republic. Kalon apprised the delegation of the Central Tibetan Administration's firm commitment to resolve the long-standing Sino-Tibet conflict through middle-way policy of seeking genuine autonomy through dialogue. Kalon also emphasized on the deteriorating human rights situation inside Tibet. The Czech foreign minister tweeted about the meeting later that day. Kalon Dolma was accompanied by Lobsang Shastri, representative at the Bureau of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in New Delhi, and Bureau Secretary Thundup Gelbo. On Tuesday last week, an Inter-Parliamentary group for Tibet was officially launched in the Spanish Senate, a cross-party group of 29 senators. An inaugural function was held to mark the formation of the group in the presence of Rinzin Chöten Genkang, representative of Office of Tibet, Brussels, Venerable Thupten Wangchen and Thupten Gyatso, member of the Tibetan Parliament in exile, representing Europe and Africa, and Rinzin Dolma, president of the Tibetan community in Spain. Sikyong Pembatsering welcomed the formation of the Inter-Parliamentary Group for Tibet in the Spanish Senate and extended an invitation to senators to visit Dharamshala in future in his video message. Representative Genkang, on behalf of the Office of Tibet, welcomed the historic initiative and thanked the President and the 28 other senators for their support. Around 35 senators and journalists attended the launch of the Inter-Parliamentary Group for Tibet. Khenpo Sonam Tempel, the Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament in exile, wrote to Spanish Senator Robert Masih Nahar to extend his gratitude to the senator and other members of the group. The European Parliament expressed concern for cases of unlawful detention, enforced disappearance, torture and ill treatment and urged China to investigate and stop violation of human rights and international law during the 38th round of EU-China Human Rights Dialogue held in Brussels. During the one-day meeting held on 17 February, the EU highlighted the particularly vulnerable situation of Tibetans, Uyghurs and persons belonging to religious, ethnic and linguistic minorities across the country and called for the immediate release of Tibetan activists and writers and religious leaders, including Go Sherab Gyatso, Rinchen Tsultim and Tashitoji. Representative Genkang welcomed the European Union's call for the immediate release of the Tibetan political prisoners and its expression of concern for the situation in Tibet. On the commencement of the 52nd session of the UN Human Rights Council on Monday this week, the Tibetan community of Switzerland and Liechtenstein organized a protest in front of the UN building against the deteriorating human rights situation in Tibet under the Chinese government rule. Addressing the gathering, Representative Tile Chuki from Tibet Bureau Geneva called on the UN member states to raise human rights issue in Tibet during the upcoming session. The president of the Tibetan community in Liechtenstein, Kama Chuki, reminded cases of Go Sherab Gyatso and other human rights defender and called for their unconditional release. The representative of the Swiss Tibetan Friendship Association, French section, Marguerite Contact, said she will advocate for human rights in Tibet at the Swiss Parliament. The 52nd UN Human Rights Council session will be held from 27 February to 4th April 2023. The United Nations Committee on Cultural, Economic and Social Rights reviewed China for the third time on China's implementation of the Covenant. The UN committee members questioned China on its monoracial policies enforcing forced assimilation of Tibetans, Uyghurs, Mongolians and others, as well as the widespread rights violation being carried out in Tibet, East Turkestan, Hong Kong, Macau and mainland China in a two-day meet from 15 to 16 February. Mohammad Azeldin Abdel Monem, chair of the United Nations Committee, chaired the review session. The task force that carried out the review consisted of country rapporteur Michael Windfor, Ludovic Hannibal, Preeti Saran and Ashraf Ali Cohen. The Chinese government delegation of 39 members was led by Ambassador Chen Zhu, permanent representative of China to the United Nations office in Geneva and other international organizations in Switzerland. The Tibet Bureau Geneva, International Campaign for Tibet, and members of its Tibet Advocacy Coalition attended the review session. Representative Tile Chuki from Tibet Bureau Geneva thanked the United Nations Committee members for the detailed review of China, touching upon all major areas. Representative Arya was invited to speak on the current human rights situation in Tibet at the International Parliamentary Alliance on China Tokyo Forum. Dr. Arya spoke on the increased Chinese repression of Tibetan people through the destruction of monasteries and religious statues, forced indoctrination of Tibetan children in Chinese boarding schools, and how China is claiming authority to select Tibetan High Lamas, including the next Dalai Lama. International Parliamentary Alliance on China, in collaboration with the Japanese Parliamentarians for Human Rights Diplomacy, organized the IPAC Tokyo Forum at the Japanese Parliament's Lower House Conference Hall in Nakatacho, Tokyo. In the opening remark as organizers, Garnet Genius, Canadian Members of Parliament, and Funayama Yasui, Japanese MP, spoke on the importance of human rights and the universal value of democracy and the rule of law. They said the democratic nation should unite to challenge the dictatorial governments violating these universal values and destroying world order. The objective of the forum, as per the organizers' statement, was to encourage a coordinated democratic response to Beijing's distortion of the rule-based international order. The Office of Tibet Canberra and the Australia-Tibet Council jointly advocated on Tibet by reaching out to the members of the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade and Human Rights Subcommittee on 14 and 15 February at the Parliament House and appealed to the call for a hearing on the human rights situation in Tibet, particularly on China's colonial boarding schools in Tibet. Representative Kama Singey and Dr. Zeo Bedford, the Executive Officer of Australia-Tibet Council, met with Members of Parliament Maria Wampukinau, Peter Khalil, Senator Linda Reynolds, the co-chairs of the All-Australian Parliamentary Group for Tibet, Members of Parliament Warren Ensch, Susan Templeman and Senator Janet Rice, and briefed them on the recent disturbing developments in Tibet related to China's assimilationist policies and extreme surveillance and monitoring tactics. The Office of Tibet in Canberra organized the first Inter-Tibetan Language Weekend Schools cultural meet in Sydney on Sunday last week. More than 100 students from 6 Tibetan weekend schools across Australia, namely Newcastle, Canberra, Sydney, Nowra, Melbourne and Campbelltown, participated in the event. Representative Kama Singey said this cultural meet is to provide an opportunity and platform for all students to showcase their abilities and talents. The event was also attended by MP Tensi Pinzo Doring and many executive members of the various Tibetan community associations, teachers and parents from the different weekend schools in Australia. On Thursday last week, the Tibet House Brazil collaborated hosting of International Conference on Science and Religion for Peace organized by Reverend Dr. H.C. Philip Ribeiro Jain, United Religions Initiative International, and Dr. Marilai Melo Pisani from the Center for Natural and Human Sciences, Federal University of ABC. The conference was held in the Federal University of ABC, Brazil. The key speaker was Venerable Geshe Doji Damdul, Director of the Tibet House, New Delhi. On the occasion of Tibetan New Year, the New Delhi Bureau Office, Settlement Office and concerned Indian offices observed a ceremony where Shri Kiran Rijiju, Honorable Minister for Law and Justice, Government of India, presided as the chief guest alongside Kyabje Yongzing Ling Chotul Rinpoche as a special guest and officiating Sikyong Kalon Dolma Geri of the Security Department. Also present, Shri Indresh Kumar, Patron, Bharat Tibat Sahayog Manch, Rinchen Lamo, member of the National Commission for Minorities, Shri Tanya Kumar Jinnappa Gunde, Shri Abhijit Haldar, DG, International Buddhist Confederation and others. Officiating Sikyong, Kalon Dolma Geri thanked Kiran Rijiju for his role in the passage of the Tibetan Rehabilitation Policy 2014 while appealing for his continued support on the same matter. Bharat Tibat Sahayog Manch patron Indresh Kumar and member of the National Commission for Minorities, Rinchen Lamo, thanked the central government for their support to the Tibetans and assured them of continued support to Tibetans. Similarly, Representative Lobsang Shastri expressed his well wishes and prayers for His Holiness the Dalai Lama's long life and harmony for Tibetans. Led by Tibetan associations, local legislatures and representatives of the community, Tibetan Losar was celebrated with much pomp and fanfare amongst Tibetans across North America. The celebration in Nepal, headed by Office of Tibet in Kathmandu, was attended by around thousands of people, including natives of Himalayan region. Kyabje Gosok Rinpoche, Representative Tsipri Lobun Tugu Ngawang Choktup, an American diplomat in Nepal, Dean R. Thompson, Swiss diplomat Elizabeth von Kappler, and Australian diplomat Felicity Volk were among the key distinguished guests at the celebration. Other guests include former and current Tibetan MPs, settlement officers, representative of the local Tibetan Assembly and NGOs, etc. Tibetans in Antwerp, led by Tibetan Association, celebrated Losar. Secretary Tingley Wangdi of Office of Tibet, Brussels, Metok Rinpoche, Geshe Tsidin, President of the Tibetan Association and RTYC, attended the celebration with the Tibetan community. That is all for this week's news edition on Tibet This Week. Thank you for watching Tibet TV.